Long ago, in 2001, I, angry Spork, rage-filled master of sarcasm, witnessed an unspeakably awesome show. It starred a foolish samurai warrior wielding a magic sword, stepping forth to oppose a demon. Before his final tale was told, Cartoon Network tore open a hole in their schedule and flung him into cancellation, like so many shows in television's maw. Now the fool seeks to return to the air and conclude the story that endeared him to me and you.
With the robot-slicing, talking dog-befriending warrior of few words returning to Adult Swim on March 11th, it only seems fair that I'm taking issue with the first arc of IDW's comic series, written by Jim Zub, with art by Andy Siriano. How well does the show translate to the sequential art narrative? Let's check out Samurai Jack issues 1 through 5 and see if these comics makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
I don't normally analyze covers, and with 5 issues to go through, I probably shouldn't start now, but I just really dig this cover here. Jack defiantly holding up his sword, and it gleams like the sunrise on the horizon, as if a new dawn for the samurai has arrived. Inside the cover, and those of the forthcoming issues, is the classic Aku monologue I thoroughly destroyed earlier. You're welcome. Followed by a presentation page of Jack doing his second best known trait, walking. He's traversed a desert wasteland, finding Sol the Seer, who knows of Jack and his mission, but warns of his death from the scorpions of the scorching sands. Jack's not worried, though, since he's lugged the remains of the robotic menaces in his bag.
Recycling is what environmentally conscious samurai do.
Cutting to the chase, Sol explains that at the beginning of the universe there was the rope of eons that wound itself to wind history forward. Aku wanted to understand time travel sorcery, but instead of cracking open a book or checking Akupedia, he stole the rope, mastered its knowledge, and shredded it so no one else could learn of it. What he didn't notice, though, is that fibers known as the threads of time were left behind, and they retained the rope's magic. One thread will lead to the others, and with all of them, Jack can restore the rope of aeons and his own place in time. Man, Sol sure can spin a yarn. The nearest thread happens to be west of Sol's tent. Guess the seer never had the inclination to get it himself. When Jack arrives, he's harangued by a spider guard, emerging from a web concealing the warrior's entrance to an arena. This scene's pretty funny, with the guard clearly and succinctly setting up what's in store for Jack, and when politely asking him to stop yelling doesn't cut it, the samurai knocks some manners into him. Jack slips through the entrance, finding a subterranean area with some creatures lounging around. What kind of place is this? It's my kind of place. I love clever wordplay. The apparent spider boss, Dreesen, considers Jack his latest combatant, and doesn't take things like no or that was no entrance, it was a trap for an answer. The thread of time is seen in the web, pointed out to us by a narration box, and the swordsman agrees to battle. He's told to pick the first among several humorously named opponents he must face. Jack reasons that 4 or 5 foes in, he'll be too weak to win, which was probably Dreesen's plan. So, he chooses all of the above.
No, I'm not going to reference the all the things meme, and shame on you for thinking I would.
The crowd seems pretty jazzed, so Dreesen goes with it, despite the silly human looking like his roommate just ate the cupcake he was saving. The fight begins, and Jack's opponents begin taking their shots, while he relies mostly on evasive tactics. Headclaw, a clear and whimsical Wolverine nod, attacks with his, head claws, but gets stuck in the ground just in time to hilariously shield Jack from Thurn the Thorny's Needle Storm attack. Another opponent attacks with a, shall we say, rear-mounted machine gun, but the projectiles are deflected to other foes before he's cut in half. Jack drops the last 2, and if you need further proof of who Headclaw is satirizing, note how often he claims to be the best. An angry Dreesen decides to challenge the samurai, until he wisely concedes. Man, for a guy with 5 working eyes out of 6, it's gotta hurt to get stared down by someone with 2. As the crowd cheers for Ponytail, Jack takes the thread as his reward and leaves. He returns to the surface as his quest for the threads of time has only begun, and we see an ominous formation in the clouds.
So, really good first issue. The show's really very well translated here, with character parodies, funny dialogue and circumstances, and even Jack's cleverness beyond just swinging a sword around still being present. And since Jack is on a quest, he should have some help. I suggest Swerve. He loves a good quest.
Issue 2 begins with some mountain climbing, Saul's directions being repeated from last issue, and our discovery that the thread can speak. Jack traverses many landscapes before coming to a village where his thread assures him there's another to be found. He's soon greeted by the twins in charge, Dis and Dat, who allege to protect their village from intruders. Our hero, of course, means no harm, but the twins insist he pay a road tax. Jack doesn't care for how they use fear to keep their people safe, and decides to have a conversation in the only language they understand: combat. Jack's faced multiple opponents before, but these twins seem to be something else, their moves in perfect tandem. After a few solid hits on our hero, they knock him over the ledge into the waters below. As it gets darker, Jack washes ashore, pondering what to do next, when his thread of time displays its incredible DVR powers and replays the fight. Jack realizes that Dis and Dat had time threads woven into their shirts, explaining their immense advantage. Jack scales the cliff in the early morning, challenging the twins to a rematch. With their first attack, Jack can see the mystic bonds of the threads and summarily slices it. Without their synchronicity, awesome word score! He defeats them with ease. Jack lectures them on fairness, that they should respect and protect those in need, then fairly pays them back for their actions.
See, causing people head trauma is totally fair when they deserve it. This'll show that police officer, and that judge, and that Applebee's greeter.
The villagers celebrate the defeat of their so-called protectors, and Jack slices up the twins' shirts to reveal 2 more threads of time. We end on a splash page as Jack leaves the grateful villagers, now with 3 threads to lead him to the rest.
The momentum has been very nicely kept up with so far, both in terms of the action and the humor. It still feels like this could have been a multi-episode arc in the TV series.
Issue 3, with a cover that looks like the world's least comfortable mosh pit, starts with Jack arriving at some Greek ruins. The threads insist he proceed, and he soon finds citizens going about their business in less ruiny surroundings. He tries to get their attention, but they all seem to ignore him, all except Glower the Great, welcoming the samurai to his protectorate, Grantus. Yeah, I'm guessing on the pronunciations. He seems friendly enough, promising Jack food and shelter and friendship, yet says he forbade the villagers from interacting with strangers. But after Jack's been there a while, he'll be a stranger no more, and the people will be more receptive.
Well, in my experience, one well-thrown rock and people generally respond. And so do the police.
Glower starts showing off his hometown until Jack's stomach rumbles, and it's mealtime. The samurai eats while Glower talks about his keen eye for recognizing good people, and that he finds Jack to be a warrior of integrity and purpose. He also mentions that it's important to him to protect Grantus. But enough of that. Time for some friendly sparring, something Glower's been lacking of late. Later, Jack mentions his quest for the Threads of Time, but Glower says he's never heard of them. But that look on his face says that may not be true. He changes the subject back to food, and Jack declines his offer of mutton and roast beast.
Wait a minute. Grantus is Whoville? It's not even Christmas time.
Glower continues to shine praise on his village. By the by, another awesome word score for pearlescent, when a crash in the distance spurs him into action. It's Aku's robot drones attacking, and Jack is quick to enter the fray. Knowing he's about to be overwhelmed, Jack insists Glower come to his aid, but the warrior just stands still as if in a state of shock as he grasps a luminescent thread across his neck. Eventually, the swarm becomes too much, and our hero takes a claw right through the chest, when the village reverts back to its dilapidated state seen earlier. Jack, shockingly not perforated, wonders if it was an illusion, but is assured that the battle did indeed occur a long time ago, by a ghostly-looking glower. Not even he survived the devastation wrought by Aku's forces, noted by his skeletal remains on the ground. The thread of time around his neck keeps his spirit tethered and shields him from his shameful memories. Funny, I thought denial was a river in Egypt. Jack tells Glower he needn't feel any shame since the destruction wasn't his doing, and reapplies the spectral guardian's earlier compliment back to him. He too is a warrior of integrity and purpose, and is a hero that should have no regrets. Glower's soul departs, leaving behind his thread, which Jack adds to the rest. The samurai continues his quest, taking some tree fruit for the road.
Another good installment, though I do kind of think that Glower was too easily convinced. He spent so long in this comfortable little fantasy world, all it took to free him was for a stranger, one he got to know a little better, albeit, to tell him the destruction wasn't his fault, and to boomerang his own compliment back at him, too. I also think Jack's fight with the robots may have been him experiencing Glower's final battle, but it's not exactly that clear. I think that in a proper animated episode, they might have expanded on it a bit more.
Issue number 4, look behind you, Jack. Look behind you, Jack! Anyway, Jack is scaling an ice wall, reflecting on the recent frigid leg of his journey, including eating some predators or evading others. He arrives at a settlement in search of food and provisions, but instead finds a guy talking about frozen farts. I'd lay odds that in an animated episode he'd be voiced by John DiMaggio. Anyway, the guy tells him about the immortal queen's party, but lamenting how poorly they all live. Jack begins to remark that a leader is only as good as their people, when Queen Crystal the Ageless arrives for her 88th birthday praise. Jack's thread tells him that another of its kind is close by, distracting him from the customary bowing, and Crystal doesn't like that. She orders her musket knights to seize him, so they open fire?
Seems counterintuitive, but technically he would be easier to seize if he was, dead.
Jack makes with his go-to move, slicing up the robot soldiers, and though the art kinda makes their wires and components look a bit more fleshy and organic, they are robots. In the fray, Crystal falls off her palanquin, and when Jack is beaten into submission, she orders him to slave away in the royal kitchen. There he meets a man named Roast. Again, I'm guessing on a pronunciation this time because, well, kitchen. He's been there for about 4,000 cakes for the eternally youthful matriarch. He didn't commit a crime to end up where he is, he just happened to be mayor when Crystal came and took over using her beauty and robots. It's not really made clear just how long Crystal's usurped her power, but given that the mayor's made her 4,000 cakes, either she's taken lying about her age to an entirely new extreme, or cake is her food of choice. Probably the latter, given that one of the slaves was just punched out by a chef bot for looking at one of the cakes in the oven.
You don't want to know what you did to Lex Luthor when he stole 40 of them. Now that was terrible.
The threads of time urge Jack forward, but he's stuck in a locked kitchen. In a really clever use of this particularly self-aware MacGuffin, the threads make the lock remember a time when it was still open. Jack takes out Robo Boyardee and rallies the other slaves. Soon enough, Crystal is presented with her cake, with a surprise nougaty samurai center. Jack makes short work of the musket knights using his sword and frosting before admonishing the queen for mistreating her starving people. After the obligatory Marie Antoinette quote, Jack chops off her ponytail, entwined with a thread of time, reverting her to her natural age. Jack departs, saying that a legacy of leadership is more important than a youthful appearance. Now the people will have their, just desserts. I like how mildly uncomfortable he is with that pun. And so Jack sets off undeterred in his quest, because otherwise this would be a boring comic.
Still a fun read, but it does admittedly feel a lot like issue 2, where Jack met a couple authority figures who were very corrupt and he had to teach them a lesson. In this case, though, it's one ruler and it involves cake and the good old-fashioned message that good looks are not as important as bigger responsibilities in life. Something we ugly folk learn early. I'm unattractive.
And this brings us to issue 5, the cover of which has Jack attacking Aku. With the darkened background, it has a nice feel that Jack is literally being surrounded by the demon's amorphous body. First, we see Jack standing in line. I'd say for tickets to the next Star Wars movie, but it's not nearly long enough. A 2-page spread summarizes various trials he's gone through to gather more threads of time, fighting monsters, climbing bookshelves, and singing in a barbershop quartet. He's zeroing in on the final thread, which takes him to Aku's fortress. The line consists of workers for his factory, making various Aku products, including a plush toy referencing the Overlord's version of Little Red Riding Hood in Season 1. As the samurai slinks around, a video of Aku welcomes his workforce. Until his workforce teleports after a month, so their employment is temporary. But until then, the factory is your home. Enjoy back-breaking labor, my pitiful worker drones. Wah!
Yeah, I worked retail for over 8 years. This is no surprise to me.
In his personal chambers, Aku sees the need to floss, and does so with the final thread of time. He muses that he hasn't had much trouble of the time-displaced samurai variety lately, and orders his magic mirror to show him what his old foe sees, only to be shown his own back. Confused at first, Aku realizes his predicament just after the nick of time, as Jack gets a good chop in before going on the defensive, with the thread still in Aku's teeth. When crushing him doesn't work, the shapeshifter tries fleeing, only to crash into his own mirror. Gotta look where you're going, man. Jack plucks the thread from Aku's teeth, restoring the rope of eons. Our hero vows to return to his time and finally vanquish the demon, but an enraged Aku uses his powers to repeatedly impale the samurai.
Jack's okay. He's okay. People survive multiple impalements all the time. Jack's okay. Jack's okay. Jack's okay.
The samurai falls, engulfed in the glow of the rope, which has paused time to parley with Jack. Wrong Jack, wrong property. He could be sent back to his proper era and still die from his injuries, or the rope could push against time's flow to before Jack was injured, but there would be no magic left to use. Given the choice between final rest or continued struggle, Jack makes his decision. Time is altered and Jack disappears before being skewered. Now, Aku knows what it's like when your foe uses time magic before the final blow is struck. Jack gets a good swipe in, and a dazed Aku mutters something about smelling chrono magic, but since the threads retained some of that already, you'd think he'd smell it all the time he used his floss. The samurai takes off, and it does feel like he could have pressed his advantage, but maybe he didn't want to risk getting kebabbed again. Narrowly escaping the factory and Aku's forces, the issue ends with Jack commandeering a hover taxi with an army on his tail. Endhood.
And that's the first 5 issues of Samurai Jack from IDW. Admittedly, I did drop the title when this arc concluded, but it was really more of a money issue. They're really quick reads, what with them not being very dialogue-heavy as, say, Transformers or Ninja Turtles from the same publisher. And it could be that uniqueness that makes Samurai Jack better suited for animation, rather than paying $4 a month for an issue of it. And on top of that, if you're not already familiar with Samurai Jack and his world, even with the exposition on the back of each cover, it potentially leaves new readers kind of scratching their heads.
That being said, it amazingly translates the feel and tone of the show in just about every respect. The action, the dialogue, the humor, wonderfully faithful designs of characters and environments, Jack's personality. In a lot of ways, despite some snafus, it's a great adaptation, likely due to the fact that Andy Siriano did character designs for the animated series. I strongly recommend it for anyone who's a fan of the show. And I'll say again, this storyline would be great as a direct-to-video movie or something, because dagnabbit, we need Phil Lamar pretending to be a samurai who's pretending to be a member of a barbershop quartet. That's your season 6 right there!
This story has also inspired me to use time-traveling magic rope to fix our own screwy timeline. Better choices for the 2016 election. DC's Flashpoint reboot and the awful movies completely averted. And maybe even save another Gendy Tartakovsky cartoon from premature cancellation. The sky's the limit! Also, ignore the fact this looks like a drawstring from an old pair of sweatpants. Oh, shucks. I smell like old library.
Everything smells like old library.